You trudge across the scorching sands of ancient Persia, sweat trickling down your spine, the soles of your sandals nearly melting with every step. The air is thick, unmoving, shimmering with heat waves that make the distant horizon flicker like a mirage. There is no breeze, no shade, no relief. Just the relentless sun bearing down with all the fury of a desert deity in a particularly bad mood. Hey guys, tonight we're traveling somewhere hot. I mean really hot. And not the summer in Florida kind of hot. Think, open the oven then stick your face inside, levels of heat. We're headed to ancient Persia, a land of breathtaking ingenuity, striking architecture, and enough sun to fry your patience. But what's fascinating isn't just how hot it was, it's how people dealt with it. They didn't just survive the heat, they engineered peace within it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're still walking, past the dusty hills, into the edges of an ancient city, where buildings rise not tall but clever. Flat roofs, thick mud brick walls, narrow alleyways, and then, above it all, you see them. Strange tower-like structures sprouting from the rooftops like square chimneys in reverse. These are badgers, or wind catchers, and they're not just decorative, they're lifelines. One of the oldest known air conditioning systems in the world. Badgers were designed to do something new. In this moment of sticky discomfort, would give anything for, catch wind. Even a whisper of it. Even the faintest movement of air. The kind you usually ignore. The Persians found a way to trap that precious breath of wind. Draw it downward, and cool their homes from the inside out. You follow a local merchant into his house, ducking under a low doorway and stepping into an unexpectedly cool, dim interior. It's at least 10 degrees cooler inside, and there's no ice. No electricity, not even a mechanical fan. Just silence, and soft air flowing down from above. Here's the thing. Most people today think of ancient Persia as all gold. Camels, and Cyrus the Great striding across battlefields. But the real miracle is quieter. It hums above your head. A simple idea with monumental implications. Historians still argue whether the wind tower was truly invented in Persia or if it evolved independently in several hot climates. But in Yazd, a city in modern Iran, they are everywhere. Even today, some houses still rely on them. Walk the narrow stone alleys there, and you'll hear the sound of wind being guided through human-made lungs. There's something almost sacred about it. You glance up at the tower again. It's got a rectangular opening at the top, facing into the wind, with vertical slats of wood dividing it into smaller vents. Inside, the tower channels the breeze downward, often past a small internal water pool or fountain, cooling the air even further through evaporation. No wires, no noise, just gravity, air pressure, and a little moisture. If you're a fan of elegant problem solving, this is your love language. And it worked. Not just barely, it worked brilliantly. These homes didn't just escape the heat. They embodied a kind of calm, even luxury, rich or poor, the technology scaled up or down. A commoner's house might have a single wind tower aimed at catching the evening breeze. A palace? Dozens, pointing in every direction, always ready to grab whatever wind dared to show up. You pause in the doorway now, adjusting to the coolness inside. The air smells faintly of wet clay and herbs. Maybe some jasmine burned earlier. Someone's placed soaked linens in front of the air shaft to cool the air even more. You lean in. The breeze is light, like a whisper on the skin, but it's constant. And in this climate, constant coolness is the closest thing to magic you'll ever experience. The idea is deceptively simple. Warm air rises, cool air drops. Direct the air through the right channels, shape the architecture to cooperate, and the laws of physics become your personal HVAC technician. It's the ultimate passive design. And yes, modern air conditioning is faster, louder, more immediate, but also more wasteful, more power-hungry, and weirdly fragile. One fuse, one outage, and you're toast. Literally. But a badger? Unless you knock the whole house down, it's still doing its job centuries later. There's a phrase locals sometimes use when describing this kind of architecture. Zisti pasif, a passive life. It means designing in harmony with nature, rather than in defiance of it. And as the midday sun begins to dip toward the horizon, you get it. You're not sweating anymore. You're not anxious or hot. You're calm, almost sleepy. Maybe it's the architecture. Maybe it's the faint sound of the wind nudging its way through the tower. Maybe it's the smell of saffron rice cooking down the street. But something about this ancient ingenuity has wrapped you in a cool, dusty embrace. And here's the kicker. Archaeologists have found wind tower ruins that date back over 2,000 years. 2,000. The same principles were used in palaces, homes, bathhouses, even storage rooms for food. When the air itself is your biggest enemy, you turn it into your greatest ally. You move deeper into the house, where sunlight filters in through high vents, casting gold squares on worn rugs. Children nap on mats under the breezy airflow. A pot of rosewater simmers in a shaded corner. The floor is slightly damp, not unpleasant, just cooled by clay tiles that absorb and radiate chill. You sit down, you breathe, you listen, and you realize the Persians didn't just build cool houses. They built lives that could withstand the fire of their world. You tilt your head back, eyes following the slow spiral of warm air as it rises toward the ceiling. Slipping into the narrow shaft of the wind tower, the badger hums faintly, not like a machine, but more like the gentle breath of the house itself. It's mesmerizing. You're not sure how long you've been watching it. Time stretches and contracts in places like this. Places built to soothe. The wind tower, or badger, isn't just a quirky invention, it's a defining element of Persian architecture. These towers weren't afterthoughts. They were often the first thing designed. Everything else, room layout, courtyard placement, material choices, followed the wind. You wander into another home now, guided by a local eager to show you his great-grandfather's house. The structure is humble, but the tower? Graceful, tall, ornate, almost like a minaret, but with the sacred purpose of coolness rather than prayer. The design is deceptively simple. An open shaft on the roof that captures passing wind and channels it downward. But the real magic lies in how it works when there is no wind. Yes, no wind. That's when it truly earns its reputation. You see, warm air rises. That's basic. But here's the twist. Even in a still desert, the inside of the house remains cooler than the outside. So the hot air inside wants to escape. The badger, with its vertical height, acts like a chimney, allowing warm air to rise and exit. And that vacuum pulls slightly cooler air in from low vents or shaded areas of the courtyard. The tower breathes, not in, but out, and the cooler air follows. Historians still debate the origins of this architectural magic. Was it Mesopotamia? Was it Egypt? Or was it Persia? Most signs point toward central Iran, Yazd in particular, as the oldest confirmed location where these structures were built deliberately to cool homes. The earliest physical evidence dates back at least 2,000 years. But some argue the technique may be even older, passed down through oral traditions and slowly improved over generations. It's the architectural version of a folk remedy, refined through practice. Not textbooks. You trace your fingers along the carved bricks of the tower base. Some are etched with floral designs. Others have faded geometric patterns. The air passing through them seems to carry stories of summers survived, of feasts enjoyed, of lovers whispering under the stars on rooftops cooled by the same breeze that brushes your face now. This particular badger is a four-directional design. That means it's built with four vertical shafts, each facing a cardinal direction, whichever way the wind blows. It's caught. Even the faintest draft is dragged down into the home like a secret guest. And if all four sides are closed, the tower still functions. The rising heat from inside finds its way out, pulling fresh air along behind it. You climb to the roof with your guide, careful not to trip on the uneven steps. Up here, the view stretches for miles, flat roofs, domes, courtyards, and, most of all, towers. Some tall, some stubby, some still in use, some half crumbled. It's like a forest of inverted chimneys, each one telling a story of its own. There's a gentle wind tonight. You hear it before you feel it. A soft whistle through the slats. Your guide steps aside and lets you lean into the tower mouth. The breeze rushes past your cheeks, not cold, but definitely cooler than the air around you. It dives downward into the home with purpose, slicing through heat like a sigh of relief. And just in case you thought this was all about physics, here's a quirky bit. Some wind towers were built asymmetrically, with one shaft deliberately narrower than the others. Why? Because it made a sound. A low, flute-like hum that changed pitch with the wind. It wasn't just for function, it was for atmosphere. Imagine falling asleep every night to your house singing lullabies on the breeze. Who needs Spotify? You wander back down into the home, passing through rooms that feel like they belong underground. Even though they're not. The ceilings are high, the walls thick, and the air perpetually cool. You reach the central courtyard, a hallmark of Persian domestic design. The wind tower's shaft opens just above, feeding fresh air into the heart of the house. Sometimes, they even added a small fountain directly beneath the shaft. Why? Because moving air over water drops the temperature further. This isn't modern refrigeration, it's evaporation. The same principle that makes your skin feel cooler when it's wet. It's subtle, it's silent, and it works. You pause beside the fountain now, running your fingers through the water. It's not icy, but it's fresh, refreshing. There's a copper jug beside it, slightly tarnished from age but still in use. You lift it, take a sip, and immediately taste the mineral tang of underground springs. Cool water, cool air, cool thoughts. You think about modern architecture. The sharp lines, the glass boxes, the sealed-off towers of concrete and steel. We've mastered temperature control with machines, but we've forgotten how to listen to nature. These badgers? They're listening all the time. To wind, to heat, to silence. And they're responding. Softly. You walk past a room where an elderly woman sits weaving. She hums to herself. A cat sleeps nearby, belly up in a spot where the airflow hits just right. Neither of them seems to notice the heat outside. The room is calm, timeless. And here's a final historical nugget for tonight. Marco Polo is said to have admired Persian homes and their cool interiors during his travels. He didn't understand how it worked, but he noticed it. Even the famously distracted Polo paused long enough to say, "Huh, this place is oddly pleasant." You lie back against the soft cushion near the wall, gaze drifting upward again toward the high ceiling. The tower breathes. The house breathes. You breathe. Slowly, deeply, calmly. Somewhere, outside the city, the desert is still broiling. But in here, you're safe. You're wrapped in a gentle science. Invented not for show, but for peace. You close your eyes, feeling the ancient air whisper across your skin. You wake, not fully. Not with a jolt, but like a slow stretch in a shaded courtyard. Your eyes flutter, but there's no alarm, no urgency. Just the low rustle of air through slats and the gentle splashing of a fountain still whispering in the corner. The house feels alive, not loud, not bustling, just breathing. You rise to explore further. Bare feet padding across tiles cool to the touch. The home curves around its own silence. And you realize it's not just the bagger making the magic here. It's the whole house. Every brick, every bend of corridor, every thick adobe wall, it's all conspiring. Not against the heat, but with it. Ancient Persians didn't fight nature. They negotiated with it, and they did it with mud. Not the sloshy, rainy day kind of mud. We're talking high-grade sun-baked adobe, molded from clay, straw, and sometimes even bits of ash or stone dust. These walls are thick, sometimes over half a meter. And that thickness? That's insulation. It holds cool air in and keeps hot air out. Walk into a sunlit room in one of these homes, and you'd swear it's air-conditioned. But nope, just smart material choices. Historians often marvel at this. That societies without thermometers managed to create thermal comfort. And yet here you are, walking through a home that predates air conditioning by a couple of millennia. And you're perfectly fine. No sweat trickling down your back. No fan pointed directly at your face. Just shade, airflow, and good decisions. You duck into a side room now, where small, high windows dot the wall like sleepy eyes. These windows aren't there to give you a view. They're there to let light in without letting heat follow. Their placement near the ceiling allows light to enter in a slant, bouncing off plastered walls and illuminating the room gently. It's like living inside a soft glow. And what's on the floor? Not rugs. Not yet. Bricks. But not just any bricks. Fired bricks in a herringbone pattern, designed to channel your footfalls and catch morning dew. Cooler than stone, and easier to clean. At night, those bricks give back some of the chill they gathered through the day. You notice a small alcove near the base of the wind tower shaft, a kind of shelf carved into the wall. On it sits a clay jar, sweating gently in the shade. That's a zir, a porous pot designed to keep water cool through, you guessed it, evaporation. The water seeps out in tiny amounts and evaporates, drawing heat from the inside and chilling the contents. You lift the lid and take a cautious sip. Still cool. No refrigeration. Just physics, doing its quiet job. And it's not just homes. Walk into a storehouse in the village, or even a kitchen pantry, and you'll find the same principles at work. Thick walls, shaded spaces, air paths that seem to loop like a maze but are actually deliberate. Every bit of airflow is planned. Every ounce of coolness is curated. Here's a quirky detail. Some ceilings in these homes were domed, not just for beauty, but for convection. Warm air naturally collects at the top of a dome, away from the people below. Combine that with a wind tower, and you've got a passive exhaust system that would make any modern engineer proud. But it's not all stone and science. There's art here too. The plaster walls are often painted in pale blues and creams, colors chosen not just for aesthetics, but for their cooling psychological effect. It's easier to feel cool in a space that looks cool. That's a trick the Persians mastered long before color theory got its own textbooks. And the smell, oh, the smell. Every room has a different scent. In one, it's fresh limes. In another, a faint trace of jasmine or rose petals left in a bowl of water. Sometimes, people hung damp cloths soaked in floral water near the vents. As the air passed through, it picked up the scent, carrying it softly through the home. Imagine your AC gently fanning out perfume instead of dust. That's the vibe. You pause in the hallway now, staring at a small wooden panel embedded in the wall. Your guide explains it's a vent cover, designed to be opened or closed depending on the wind direction. People here knew which winds were helpful and which ones were just hot air. Adjusting vents became a morning ritual, like brushing your teeth. Predict the wind, guide it right, and your whole day is better. And speaking of predictions, ancient Persian architects even oriented houses based on seasonal wind patterns. That's right, the house you're in? It wasn't plopped down randomly. Its entrance, courtyard, tower, all aligned with the cardinal directions and prevailing winds of the region. They weren't building on land, they were building with it. Historians still argue whether Persian houses evolved this way due to necessity or genius. But the answer is probably yes. Both. It was too hot to be careless, and too resourceful a culture to miss an opportunity to outwit the climate. You step into the kitchen, where a clay stove sits quietly in one corner. It's not in use now, but you imagine the family gathering here in the evenings. The badger keeping air circulating even as the food warms. There's a narrow flue that directs heat away, and shelves carved directly into the wall to avoid clutter. No plastic, no gadgets, just utility, disguised as grace. And here comes your daily reminder that life in ancient Persia wasn't all chilled breezes and sun-kissed courtyards. During dust storms or shamal winds, residents had to seal their towers. Screens and shutters were lowered, vents closed, and wet cloths hung at doorways to filter air. You'd retreat to the inner rooms, the deepest, darkest spaces, and wait out the fury. Still, even then, the house kept its calm. It's cool. One final flourish before we leave this home. You notice a small skylight in the ceiling, nothing fancy. Just a slit, but it lets in just enough light to illuminate a mosaic floor, blues, whites, and golds in the shape of stars. When the wind blows through the tower above, The light seems to ripple across the pattern like water. It's like the house is sighing, content with its quiet victory over the heat. You sit down again, cross-legged, in the center of this careful masterpiece of air and stone and shade. And you start to feel it. Not just the coolness, but the wisdom, the stillness, the long, slow exhale of a place that's been calming people down for 2,000 years. You linger in that quiet room, the one with the mosaic stars on the floor and the hush of ancient air above your head. And for a moment it hits you, none of this is accidental. The cool air, the peaceful layout, the way your body feels slightly lighter than it did outside, all of it is by design. A kind of slow, sleepy alchemy, and at the heart of it, a few basic truths of air movement that any middle school science teacher would applaud. Hot air rises, cool air sinks. You've known this since the day someone first explained why your attic is an oven. But the people who built this house didn't just understand it. They used it, religiously, obsessively, elegantly. You shuffle into another room, this one smaller, with clay jugs lining the walls and woven baskets hanging from ceiling hooks. It's cooler here, not just comfortable, but genuinely refreshing. A breeze winds through like a ghost with good manners, brushing your arms and neck, leaving goosebumps in its wake. It's as if the air itself has been trained. And it has. The ceiling here is slightly domed again, and the floor is sunken. That's intentional. When hot air rises, it leaves behind a vacuum, just enough pressure change to suck cooler air inward. The sunken floor helps collect that heavier, denser air, and the domed ceiling gives the warm stuff a place to gather. Far away from where you're trying to nap, or eat, or sit and be left alone. You glance upward at the point where the dome's curve ends in a small vent, another subtle release valve. It's like watching a slow, invisible symphony, air rising, curving, escaping, being replaced. No fans, no hums, no humdrum noise of electricity. Just passive physics playing out like a lullaby. There's another trick you spot. The doorway is low, just tall enough for you to duck through. Annoying? Maybe, but there's a reason. Shorter doorways mean less hot air escapes into the rooms when the door is opened. Less mixing, more control, and once you're inside, the ceilings rise again, creating that same beautiful convection pattern that turns the whole space into a slow cooker for serenity. Historians often describe Persian domestic design as introverted architecture. That doesn't mean the house prefers to be alone at parties. It means the design turns inward. Instead of showing off with tall windows or flashy facades, everything points toward the inner courtyard, the true heart of the home. And guess what lives there? Yep, your old friend, the badger, always positioned just right, always watching the wind. You walk back through a hallway where the walls curve slightly, not by mistake. Curved passageways help direct air without letting it just shoot through. Straight lines are for soldiers. Air needs flow. Persians knew that. They knew the way a breeze dances, not marches. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some homes even included small water channels, or sardabs, that ran beneath the floor. Shallow, narrow, and shaded. They cooled the ground beneath your feet and helped drop air temperature by a few subtle but crucial degrees. Some of them even connected to the city's underground canal system, a whole network of water tunnels we'll get to later. For now, just picture a secret stream gently flowing beneath your rug. Cool, quiet, hidden. It's a Persian architectural whisper. You pass a room with slatted wooden doors, not solid, not quite open. They filter light and airflow simultaneously. The slats are angled, not because someone measured wrong, but because someone measured very right. They're tilted to catch light but deflect heat. The effect? Dappled sunlight and a cross breeze. Like walking into a sunbeam that decided to be polite. And in all this miracle of mud, air, and science, there's a mood, a rhythm. It slows your heartbeat without asking. You don't try to relax. You just do. There's a running scholarly debate about whether these techniques spread across trade routes or emerged independently in similar climates. Egypt had its own cooling towers. So did certain parts of Pakistan and the Arabian Peninsula. But the Persian model stands out for how seamlessly it integrated into daily life. It wasn't an add-on. It was the spine of the home. You step out into the courtyard again, shielded on all sides by high walls. There's a pomegranate tree in the center, its leaves twitching softly under the airflow descending from above. That descending motion, by the way, that's a design feature. The tower doesn't just catch wind, it pressurizes it. As the air drops down the shaft, it speeds up slightly, cools as it brushes past damp surfaces, and then spreads out across the floor like a polite guest who always removes their shoes. And now, a moment of humility, because even with all this genius design, even with badgers and domes and mud brick poetry, there were limits. July and Yazd? Still brutal. But the difference between, I might faint, and, I can sip tea in peace, is often just a few degrees. And the badger gives you those degrees. Quietly, faithfully, night after night, you sit again, this time near a corner where two walls meet at a shaded bench. The bench is slightly elevated, covered in old fabric, and placed right where the airflow from the tower hits a turn. You feel it instantly. This was the family's favorite spot. You can tell. It feels right. And if your modern brain is still wondering whether this works better than air conditioning, well, define better. It's silent. It doesn't break down. It doesn't need electricity. And it makes you slow down. Makes you live a little softer. Maybe that's not better in the modern sense, but it might be better for your soul. You lean your head back, letting the airflow brush your cheeks again. You try to track it, from roof to shaft to slats to this moment. It's like tracing a breeze through time. A breeze that once cooled poets, merchants, old men telling stories, children chasing cats, and now, you, sitting here, wondering how the ancients made the air behave so beautifully. You slide your fingers along the smooth clay bench, still cool from the gentle currents above, and feel a subtle vibration, a reminder that something deeper runs beneath this place. Not just architectural grace or desert-born wisdom, but actual water, silent, buried, purposeful. It's time you met the Qanat. The air around you shifts slightly, growing cooler as you step into a side corridor. This one leads underground. There's no dramatic staircase, no torchlit descent into a grand chamber. Just a gradual slope, carved from the same earth that surrounds it, leading you into a long, narrow tunnel. It smells of minerals and damp clay. The walls sweat a little. And then you hear it, that faint, rhythmic drip of water echoing down the passage like a heartbeat. Welcome to the Qanat, an engineering marvel so humble it rarely makes the headlines. And yet it's arguably one of the greatest hydrological inventions in human history. Picture this, an underground canal, gently sloped over miles, carrying cold, clean water from an aquifer in the mountains to the arid city below, all without pumps, pipes, or electricity. Gravity does all the work. You don't see the water, but it's there, flowing, quietly saving lives. You walk beside the narrow channel now, watching as the water moves, not rushing, but steady. It hugs the edge of the rock channel like it knows where it's going. And it does. Qanats are mapped with extraordinary precision. Ventilation shafts above ground, thin, chimney-like holes, dot the landscape like tiny breadcrumbs, allowing fresh air in and providing access for maintenance. From above, it looks like someone played connect the dots with the desert. And here's the kicker. The Qanats and the badgers? They're teammates. The real brilliance begins when those two systems intersect. Some wind towers are built to direct air over Qanat channels before sending it into the home. Why? Because as the breeze passes over the underground water, it cools, like a whisper brushing against a snowbank. The wind comes out the other end fresh and tempered. You emerge into a subterranean chamber, half cellar, half shrine. It's a Shabastan, a kind of underground summer room found in Persian houses and mosques. These spaces are cooled by badgers and Qanats working in perfect harmony. The air is almost too cool here, like walking into the past and realizing it had better climate control than your apartment. Historians still debate exactly how early this combination of badger and Qanat occurred. Some say it was in the Achaemenid era. Others argue for later Islamic Persia. But one thing's certain, when these two systems united, they gave birth to one of the most sustainable and elegant indoor environments ever designed. A fringe theory even suggests that some Persian cities intentionally avoided surface-level water storage because underground channels were not only cooler, they were safer. Less evaporation, less risk of contamination, less chance of your neighbor's goat falling in. You sit near a bend in the tunnel now. Beside a small niche where someone's placed a stone jug. The water inside tastes impossibly clean. Cold, even. You sip slowly. It doesn't just hydrate. It comforts. It tells you, you're not just surviving the desert. You're living in it. Above your head, a shaft channels light in from the surface, just enough to see. But here, underground, it's the temperature that dominates. Coolness wraps around your ankles, slides up your spine, makes you exhale with that long, sleepy sound you didn't even know you'd been holding in. This is engineered rest, a chilled pause in the middle of a scorching world. You remember something your guide mentioned earlier. Some ancient Persian cities were entirely planned around the flow of qanats. Streets, homes, gardens, all laid out in subtle alignment with the invisible veins of water beneath. You find that both astonishing and somehow respectful. The city wasn't imposed on the land. It was invited. And the labor? Oh, it was immense. Digging a qanat required skill, generations of expertise, and often, lives. The slope had to be exact. Too steep, and the water would rush and erode. Too shallow, and it would stagnate. They used simple tools, keen eyes, and sheer intuition, plus a healthy dose of trial, error, and corrections made in the quiet shade of centuries. There's even a spiritual aura to qanats. In Zoroastrian tradition, water is sacred, a pure element. The builders of qanats weren't just engineers. They were guardians of a sacred current. And when you combine that with the breath-like design of the badger above, you begin to see the full picture. A house that breathes and drinks. A home that inhales wind and exhales peace. You make your way slowly back up toward the light. The incline is gentle, but you can feel the difference in air density with every step. Warmer, drier, brighter. It's as if the desert were waiting for you. Patiently, arms crossed, heat blazing. But you step back into the courtyard. And immediately the badger resumes its work. Air flows downward again. Not icy, not artificial, but welcome. You realize that while the qanat cools from below and the badger from above, you are the center, the human, the inhabitant, the one who benefits from this ancient partnership. And suddenly, you don't see these structures as old anymore. You see them as wise. Imagine if your house worked like this. Imagine if your walls breathed and your water flowed invisibly beneath you. Not in service of modern convenience, but of comfort, a slow, sustainable comfort, the kind that doesn't ask for attention, but always shows up. You sit in the shade again. Someone brings you a glass of something herbal and cold. It smells like mint, but tastes like silence. You sip, lean back, and let the wind tower and the qanat do their work. Together, just like they always have. You're sitting again, this time in a shaded alcove where two stone walls meet at an angle, guiding the air like water through a canal. You're beginning to see it now, not just the parts, but the system. This entire home isn't a collection of architectural flourishes. It's a machine, a gentle, silent, cooling machine designed for one purpose, to keep people alive, and preferably comfortable, in a place that has no business being so forgiving. And now, let's play a game of air trap. You walk toward the central shaft of a particularly large wind tower. Unlike the smaller, simpler ones you've seen before, this one is elaborate, taller, multi-chambered, and facing every direction. 4 vertical slits catch wind from the north, south, east, and west. A badger like this doesn't wait for the wind to pick a side. It takes whatever it can get. This design is known as a multi-directional badger, and it's one of the most brilliant innovations of its time. Even when the wind shifts, this tower is always listening. Whichever opening catches the strongest current, that shaft becomes the active channel. Meanwhile, the others might release warm air or simply rest, waiting for their turn. It's a passive system with active intelligence, like a cat that sleeps with one eye open. Inside the tower, partitions direct the air, sometimes sending it downward into the living spaces, sometimes across an underground water reservoir. The combination of direction and flow can create subtle pressure differences that draw stale air out while bringing cool air in. You stand beneath one of these shafts and feel it, real airflow. Not just a breeze, but a stream, controlled, intentional, almost engineered by instinct. Historians still argue whether these towers were developed independently in multiple cities or if the technology slowly diffused along trade routes from Yazd and Bam outward. What's less debated is how far the idea eventually traveled, across the Islamic world. Into North Africa, across the Indian subcontinent, the windcatcher was a Persian gift, unwrapped and reinterpreted by dozens of cultures. But here's a weird, fringe tidbit. Not all badgers were built above houses. Some were attached beside or even below, depending on the local landscape and prevailing winds. In coastal cities or areas with unusual terrain, wind towers might be dug partially underground and tilted at odd angles to capture marine breezes. They looked strange, but they worked. You wander now into a large domed chamber, part of a caravanserai. One of those roadside inns that dotted the Silk Road. Traders would stop here, unload their camels, haggle over spices, and sleep under the cool breath of a very grand badger. This one is a marvel, 8 shafts, each opening slightly outward, not just catching the breeze but funneling it down in a spiral. It's like standing inside a lung, or a temple, or both. The dome above you is enormous, maybe 10 meters high, with a single aperture at the top. You realize this isn't just for decoration. Warm air pools in the dome and rises to the opening, escaping with dignity. Meanwhile, the badgers surrounding the chamber pull in fresh air from every direction. The room breathes better than most people do. And the traders? They loved it. After days on the road, sweating under the sun, trudging through sandstorms and mountains, they would step into this shaded, whispering space and feel human again. No machines, no buttons, just relief. You sit on a stone bench near the wall, watching as shadows stretch across the floor in delicate geometric patterns. A pigeon coos somewhere up in the rafters. The air is moving, slowly, deliberately, like someone opening the door just wide enough to let in the breeze and no more. Your guide appears again, smiling, and leads you toward a side passage. Watch your step, he says softly, as the floor begins to slope downward. You follow him into a cooler room, so cool. In fact, that your skin prickles. This is a yakshal, an ancient Persian ice house. And yes, there's ice. In the desert. It's not winter. It's not nighttime. But here, blocks of ice, cut in colder months and stored below ground, remain intact deep into the summer. The air inside is carefully managed by a badger and a ventilation shaft designed to minimize heat. The cone-shaped dome of the yakshal above reflects sunlight. The walls are made from special insulating materials, including a mix of sand, clay, ash, goat hair, and lime. It's like walking into a giant thermos. And there, in the center of the room, is a shallow pool. The air that enters from the wind tower passes over the pool and spirals downward into the space below. Cool air stays, warm air rises. It's always the same rhythm. Always the same breath. You close your eyes and imagine a merchant in the 12th century walking into this space, wiping dust from his beard, setting down his bag of saffron or indigo, and simply resting, letting the air do its work. The same air, perhaps, brushing your face now. There's something oddly reassuring about the idea that a building can care for you. That it doesn't just house your body, but tends to your comfort. Persian wind towers aren't flashy. They don't buzz or beep or glow. They just exist, faithfully, constantly, quietly. And perhaps that's why they feel so human. As you walk back outside, the sun is lower now, casting long shadows across the courtyard. The wind has picked up a little, rustling the trees. The badgers stand tall above the rooftops, stoic and still, but always listening. They are waiting to serve the wind. And, by extension, you. You make your way slowly to the roof, drawn upward by the promise of cooler air and open sky. The steps are uneven, worn smooth by centuries of bare feet. Baskets of fruit, jugs of water, and sleepy midnight walks under the stars. At the top, the view unfurls like a quiet celebration, mud brick rooftops stretching to the horizon, dotted with chimneys, domes, and the ever-watching wind towers. It's sunset now. The heat of the day has broken, but the air still holds its weight. Except up here, where the breeze moves a little more freely, brushing against your cheeks like it remembers you. And that's when you notice it. Beds. Not permanent ones. Not with mattresses and pillows and headboards. Just woven mats. Some with thin cushions. Others plain. Arranged across rooftops like offerings to the sky. Welcome to one of the most cherished summer rituals in ancient Persia. Sleeping on the roof. You lie down, just to try it. The mat is firm but familiar. The air here is dry, clean, and constantly moving, thanks in part to the elevation, but also the gentle pull of the badgers still humming through the city. You can hear them if you listen closely, not a sound exactly. More like a feeling of breath traveling through clay. Sleeping on the roof wasn't just about heat relief. It was about stars, silence, family. Entire households would migrate upward in the summer months. Parents, children, even pets. Blankets laid out side by side. Water jars within arm's reach. And stories shared under constellations that looked a little sharper in the Persian sky. A fringe practice some families observed involved placing bowls of water near the edges of the mat to cool the spirits, or absorb heat, whether it worked or not. No one can say for sure. But when you wake in the middle of the night and feel that slight coolness in the air, it doesn't really matter why it works. Just that it does. Historians still debate whether rooftop sleeping was purely a heat mitigation strategy or also a deeply rooted cultural tradition. Likely both. What is certain is that many homes were designed with flat roofs not just for practicality, but because they were expected to be lived on. The roof was a room with no ceiling, except the heavens. You roll onto your side and imagine a family beside you. A father softly retelling an old fable. A mother whispering corrections with a smile. Children squinting at the stars, trying to remember which one was supposed to be the lion and which one was the giant fish. Even now, people in Yazd and nearby towns still practice this rooftop migration. It's one of the few traditions modern AC hasn't completely erased. The wind towers aid in this ritual too. As air cools and moves down through the homes, it often exits through floor-level vents or shaded passageways, creating a subtle vacuum that encourages even more air to rise. That upward movement continues past the rooftops, sweeping past the mats and sleepers, catching the corner of a blanket here, the edge of a curtain there. You glance across the rooftops and see a few herbs planted in clay pots, basil, mint, perhaps a bit of thyme. People kept them not just for cooking but for scent. The breeze would carry their aroma across the roof, helping to keep mosquitoes at bay and creating an atmosphere of nighttime peace. And the soundscape? Soft, delicate, a donkey brays in the distance, followed by the murmur of a far-off conversation. Maybe a lullaby, maybe just neighbors sharing gossip across rooftops. But always hushed, always gentle, like the city itself knew that everyone was trying to drift off. You notice a small bamboo fan tucked beside the mat, handheld. Palm-sized, decorative. It likely hasn't been used in hours. Up here, the architecture handles the cooling. Now and then, the desert plays tricks. A warm gust will interrupt the flow, reminding you of how fierce the sun was just hours ago. But it passes quickly, and the badgers reclaim the moment. Their gentle exhale continues, uninterrupted. Here's something curious. During certain seasons, some badgers were partially sealed at night to reduce airflow and prevent the intrusion of desert dust. Adjustable wooden panels or shutters were used, beautifully crafted, like everything else, and operated manually each evening. Managing airflow was a family responsibility, passed down like a recipe. And sometimes, there were recipes. Late at night, someone might bring up chilled watermelon slices or dates soaked in rosewater. A small treat, a reward for enduring the day. You imagine the sweetness on your tongue, the cold juice, the whisper of wind over your skin, and suddenly, you're not just understanding Persian cooling. You're feeling it. Modern buildings often seal us away from nature, windows that don't open, rooms designed for stillness. But here, the whole home is part of the climate. The wind tower doesn't replace the world outside. It brings it in, filtered, cooled, and made kind. You breathe slowly now, eyelids heavy. Above you, the stars begin their ancient dance. Around you, rooftops become bedrooms. And beneath you, the earth sighs with the memory of 1,000 years of summer nights. Wind-fed sleep, and the quiet genius of people who learned how to live with the heat. Not against it. The morning arrives without fanfare. There's no sharp burst of sunlight or jarring alarm. Just a subtle change in the air. The breeze softens. The shadows stretch longer across the roof. And somewhere below, a rooster remembers his job. You sit up on your rooftop mat, rubbing the sleep from your eyes. Surprisingly, you're not drenched in sweat. The wind towers have done their duty, whispering through the night like quiet guardians. You descend back into the house, taking note of how the air shifts between levels. It's warmer below, but still bearable. The mud brick has held the night's coolness like a secret it refuses to give up too quickly. In the kitchen, someone's preparing a simple breakfast: flatbread, dates, and tea steeped with cardamom. The scent wraps itself around you before you even see the steam rise. You sit down to eat, and it occurs to you, the people who lived in these homes weren't just cooling their houses. They were cooling their lives. Everything, how they dressed, how they moved, when they rested, was part of the same unspoken agreement with the climate. To resist was suffering. To adapt was grace. Take clothing, for instance. You notice your guide's attire: light linen, long sleeves, loose fit, nothing flashy, but every inch of it is functional. Loose clothing traps a layer of air close to the body, insulating it against extreme heat. The fabric breathes, it moves with you. And the long sleeves? They protect against sunburn and dehydration better than any tank top ever could. Historians still debate how much of Persian daily dress was religious versus environmental. But most agree it was both. Practicality wrapped in tradition. And stylish, too, once you get used to the idea that elegance doesn't have to involve discomfort. Here's a fun detail. During particularly hot afternoons, families would take what was called a nima kab, a midday rest. Not unlike the Spanish siesta. Shops would close, homes would fall quiet, and even the birds seemed to nap. It wasn't laziness, it was intelligence, a cultural adaptation to the climate. And honestly, it sounds like a policy we could use today. You move through the house again, this time paying closer attention to the small things. Damp cloths draped over jars, rosewater sprinkled on stone floors, incense sticks burning in shaded corners, not just for scent, but to keep insects away and add a little ritual to the afternoon hush. Everything has a purpose, everything cools. In the bathroom area, you spot a curious device, a clay vessel with a narrow neck and wide belly. It's suspended in a shaded nook, and next to it is a small bowl. It's a mashk, a traditional water skin, usually made from goat leather, used to keep water cool through evaporation. Hang it in a drafty spot, and the breeze will pull moisture from the porous surface, chilling the liquid inside. No refrigeration needed, just wind and patience. And then, there's the rosewater. You've smelled it everywhere, mixed with tea, dabbed on wrists, drifting from soaked fabrics hanging by the windows. It's not just about smelling nice. In the heat, rosewater was used to calm the skin, ease headaches, and freshen up linens. Some families even placed shallow bowls of it near Badger vents, letting the air carry the scent through the home like an herbal lullaby. There's a quiet elegance to all this. Cooling wasn't just mechanical, it was emotional, it was atmospheric. You weren't just lowering temperature, you were elevating comfort. In the main room, your guide shows you a hand fan carved from wood and palm fronds. Not for emergencies, he jokes, just for theatrics. Turns out, it's mostly symbolic, because if you need the fan, it means the architecture failed. And around here, that's rare. You take a seat on a cushioned platform built against the wall, strategically placed in the path of one of the wind tower's cooler shafts. It's not cold, just refreshingly pleasant, enough to let you sip your tea without breaking into a sweat. Enough to make you forget that it's 42 degrees Celsius outside. And what did they do during extreme heat? When even the wind seemed too tired to move? Well, in some homes, family members retreated to the sardab, a basement room designed specifically for summer use. Thick walls, shaded entrance, access to water channels, and usually at least one badger aimed right at it. Some of these rooms even had low daybeds carved into the walls, covered in simple cotton cloth, and arranged so the airflow brushed just along the skin. You'd rest there in silence, listening to the soft hiss of air meeting stone, the occasional chirp of birds above, and maybe the distant clink of dishes being washed with well water. A fringe story your guide shares, perhaps apocryphal, but charming, is that in some towns, it was considered rude to talk loudly in a sardab during summer afternoons. Not because of noise, but because raising your voice was thought to disturb the air. Whether or not that's true, it speaks to the reverence people had for airflow. You didn't just enjoy it, you respected it. You walk again, slower this time. The home feels like a living thing now. Every turn, every surface, every corridor plays a role. Nothing is wasted, nothing is random. You pass a low archway leading to a quiet room, likely a bedroom. A woven curtain moves gently in the breeze. The air smells faintly of chamomile. You pause, smile, and feel your body soften. And here's a moment of modern humility. The average Persian home, 1,000 years ago, had a more effective and energy-efficient cooling system than most buildings built last year. Without carbon emissions, without noise, without dependence on fragile grids. It was just wind, water, clay, and wisdom. You wander farther now, following the sound of trickling water echoing faintly down a corridor. The air grows even cooler as you turn a corner and step into a space that feels different, not just in temperature, but in energy. It's quieter here, solemn somehow, and rich with scent, soap, aged stone, and steam that's long since faded. You've entered a hammam, an ancient Persian public bathhouse. But don't be fooled by the name. This isn't a simple washroom. It's a sanctuary, a social space, and, yes, a masterclass in environmental cooling. At first glance, it looks like any other series of chambers. High ceilings, domes with star-shaped cutouts that let in shafts of light, and large, shallow basins carved into the floor. But the moment you take a few steps inside, your skin registers it. It's cool, damp, but not oppressive. You could sit here all day. And people often did. This hammam, like many of its time, was designed not only to facilitate bathing but to manage temperature year-round. It used a combination of badgers, underground water sources, and thick thermal walls to create a range of temperatures within one building, warm in the central pool area, cool in the changing rooms, and downright chilly in the shaded outer vestibules. One of the more fascinating techniques used in hammams was something historians refer to as thermal zoning. Rooms were deliberately arranged by temperature, starting cool and moving inward to warm, then reversing that order on the way out. It wasn't just for comfort. It was about helping the body acclimate gradually to heat or cold. Imagine that. A building that cared about your circulatory system. Your guide points up toward the ceiling. Tiny holes in a dome, called rishanis, allow sunlight to stream in gently, avoiding direct beams that might heat the air too quickly. These rishanis often had colored glass or screens inserted to diffuse the light, creating a stained glass glow that danced on the tiled walls and soothed the mind. Historians still discuss whether the hammam design was entirely Persian in origin or a hybrid form evolved from Roman and Greek bathhouses. But what's clear is that by the time it reached full form in cities like Isfahan and Shiraz, it had become uniquely Persian, less about spectacle, more about peace. You step into the changing area, a large, open hall with a domed ceiling, soft cushions on raised platforms, and walls tiled in pale blues and earthy reds. Here, bathers would rest after their soak, often sipping herbal infusions or nibbling dates and dried fruit. Conversation happened here, but it was subdued, respectful. The mood was meditative. After all, this wasn't just a place to clean the body. It was a place to cool the mind. A fringe detail you might appreciate in some elite hammams. A badger was installed not for the main chamber, but solely for the musicians' corner. Yes, musicians. On special days, a bathhouse might feature live oud or ney music, played gently in a shaded alcove, with the wind tower ensuring the instruments stayed in tune, and the players didn't pass out from the heat. A cooling system for the soul and the soundtrack. You move into the central bathing room next. There's no water here now, just the memory of it. Shallow marble basins line the floor, with small alcoves carved into the wall where people once placed their towels. Oil flasks and sandals. You can imagine the sound of conversation echoing off the dome, laughter mixing with steam, and all of it suspended in the slow swirl of cool and warm air meeting halfway. Even the floors tell a story. Slightly sloped, subtly textured, and designed to drain water away without splashing or pooling. Clay bricks laid in herringbone patterns to help feet grip. Even when slick, the tilework, glazed, decorative, cooling to the touch, was chosen for both beauty and thermal regulation. As you sit along the wall, your back against the cool tile, your eyes close without effort, the air hums, not with sound, but with balance. This room, this whole building, is a poem written in temperature. And somehow, you're part of the verse. You reflect for a moment on what a modern spa feels like: bright lights, humming machinery, sterile silence. And then you look around this hammam. The light is soft, the breeze is real, the quiet is deep, everything is tangible. The walls don't contain the air, they shape it, slow it, soothe it. Your guide tells you that some hammams had seasonal settings. In winter, thicker curtains were drawn across interior doorways to retain warmth. In summer, the curtains came down, badgers were opened fully, and water in the basins was refreshed more frequently to maintain cooler temperatures. Even the building knew when to adapt. It's easy to romanticize the past, to think of these structures as museum pieces, charming relics of a simpler time. But this hammam, this wind tower, this entire world of passive cooling, it wasn't a luxury. It was survival. The desert didn't forgive mistakes. You either worked with it or suffered. And the Persians? They worked with it like composers scoring a symphony. You stand again, take a deep breath, and walk slowly toward the exit of the hammam. The sunlight beyond is brighter now. The air drier, sharper, but you're ready for it. You've been cooled, calmed, and carried by stone, water, and wind. As you step back into the street, the badgers overhead still tower above, catching and curating the desert breeze. In that moment, you understand, these aren't just structures. They're guardians, quiet ones, gentle ones, but guardians all the same. You emerge from the hammam with your skin cooled and your spirit quieter than it's been in days. The midday sun glints off the rooftops. But even now, the streets aren't as unbearable as you might expect. That's because something clever is happening around you, something architectural, something environmental, and something deeply intentional. You've entered the bazaar. Now, if you're picturing a noisy, chaotic tangle of cloth stalls and shouting vendors, you're not wrong. But what you're probably not picturing is how cool it feels. Not metaphorically, literally. Even in the hottest part of the day, the Persian bazaar maintains a temperature noticeably below the outside world. And not because of magic. Because of design. You step into the main corridor of the marketplace. And the difference is instant. The air shifts, becomes drier, calmer, more navigable. High archways soar above you, forming vaulted ceilings that trap rising heat and allow it to escape through clerestory vents at the top. Some have small openings near the domes, air holes that funnel out warm air and invite movement below. Others are connected to, you guessed it, wind towers. Even in commerce, the breeze was a business partner. The corridors are long, often narrow, and not always straight, and that's important. The meandering paths slow the wind just enough to keep it from gusting, while still allowing it to move through like a quiet guest browsing rugs. The floors are laid with stone or packed earth, both good at absorbing nighttime coolness and slowly releasing it during the day. Historians agree, Persian marketplaces weren't just economic hubs. They were social and climatic safe havens. In summer, the bazaar became a walking air tunnel, a place where trade, gossip, and cooling converged. You pass a spice vendor now, his cart heavy with cumin, cardamom, and dried lime. The scents bloom in the air. Intensified but not suffocating. That's another trick of the airflow. The steady breeze wafting through the corridor doesn't just cool you. It stirs up smell in a way that makes the whole experience richer. Nearby, a woman sells fabrics dyed with natural pigments. She points to the ceiling and says, "We measure rent by the draft." A joke, but not really. Stalls placed directly beneath the airflow vents often became prime real estate, not just for comfort, but because customers lingered longer. You're more likely to browse when you're not about to faint. Here's a fascinating, lesser-known detail. Some bazaars included built-in water features, tiny channels running alongside the footpaths or fountains positioned strategically to humidify the air just enough to take the edge off. That water, drawn from the city's canal system, also helped carry heat out through evaporation, creating tiny microclimates of shade and scent. In other words, a market was a machine as much as a marketplace. And not just the indoor sections. Even outdoor stalls were shaded by woven canopies or extended rooflines, often arranged to face the prevailing winds. Merchants studied airflow the way modern shop owners study foot traffic. If the breeze came from the north, your stall opened that way. If the wind was fickle, you adjusted. Everyone had a plan. And backup cloth. A fringe theory some scholars propose, that seasonal market layouts evolved partly in response to wind behavior. Summer corridors would be used differently from winter ones, and entire sectors of the bazaar would breathe with the seasons. Like lungs, flexible, functional, and always attuned to nature. You pause near a tea shop now, low stools, copper kettles, fragrant steam rising in rhythm with the slow desert air. The tea is strong and hot. Paradoxically the drink of choice in extreme heat. Why? Because it makes you sweat. And sweating, in this context, cools you, but not all at once. It's a slow burn, a calibrated chill. As you sip, you notice something else, the chatter. People talk here, of course. But it's not loud. The vaulted ceilings muffle and mellow voices, turning the clamor into background murmur. You could fall asleep here. Many have. You continue your walk, past glass jars of rose petals, candied almonds, saffron threads like red gold, and soft leather shoes lined with lamb's wool. Everything is tactile. Everything invites you to pause, touch, feel, and thanks to the breeze winding through the alleys, you don't have to rush to shade or chase an air conditioner. The market is the shade. The market is the conditioner. Overhead, a large dome marks the center of the bazaar, the Shahar Sukh. The crossroads. It's where four paths intersect under one tall roof. From here, the air moves out in every direction. A place of convergence for wind, goods, and people. Above the dome's peak, more Rishanis filter in sunlight, casting a patterned glow across the tiled floor. You walk slowly across it, a shadow among shadows. And if you listen, you'll hear it. That whisper of wind weaving through stone and plaster, moving past baskets and linen drapes, through rosewood boxes and hanging scales. It's not loud, but it's present, always present. You step into a stall selling ceramics. The shopkeeper nods. You pick up a small jug, glazed cobalt, ridged for grip, designed to keep water cool even when left in the sun. Its form and function, ancient style. You buy it, not because you need another jug, but because it feels like owning a piece of the wind. Modern malls pipe in artificial air, dehumidify, sanitize, and isolate. But here, the market breathes with you. The breeze is honest, the cooling is earned, and the reward is not just comfort, but connection. To earth, to craft, to cleverness. You exit the bazaar, arms a little fuller, soul a little lighter, and as you glance back one last time, you notice a small child pointing at the wind tower perched high above the roofline. She says something you can't hear, but her smile tells you she knows, up there. The wind is still watching. You leave the bazaar behind, still carrying the quiet sense of awe that follows you like a shadow when you realize how seamlessly ancient life worked with nature. Your feet brush dusty stone as you walk, and above the rooftops, the wind towers stand like faithful sentinels. Unmoving yet constantly in motion, working without working. Now, let's zoom out. You're not just in a home anymore, or a bathhouse, or a market. You're standing in the heart of an empire. A place where badgers weren't just clever household features. They were symbols of status, of refinement, of power. You arrive at a grand estate, perhaps one of the summer residences of a noble or an official in the Persian court. You can tell it's different even before you cross the threshold. The entrance is elevated, the archways are wider, and the badgers? Monuments, towering, ornate, multi-tiered structures that don't just catch the wind, they command it. These elite wind towers often combined architectural flamboyance with hyper-functionality. More than simple shafts, they featured layered facades with intricate woodwork, lattice screens, and sometimes even decorative tiles. Because when you're rich in ancient Persia, you don't just want to be cool. You want everyone to know you're cool. You enter the courtyard, and suddenly the air itself feels thicker with silence. Not heat, silence. There's a long pool running down the center, edged with flowering shrubs and shaded by orange trees. This is where wind and water became true partners in luxury. As the breeze filters down through the badgers, it passes over the pool, cooling and humidifying before reaching the shaded seating areas along the sides. It's the ancient equivalent of central air, with ambiance. And let's be honest, it's gorgeous. The pool reflects the sky. The leaves rustle. The wind moves. You sit at the edge and dip your hand in the water, feeling the subtle shift as the air brushes your skin from behind. It's so refined it borders on cinematic. You're told this estate was designed on the principle of hava-kordi, literally. Air eating. Yes, eating air. It refers to the act of seeking and savoring fresh breezes. Especially in hot climates. Upper-class Persians built homes specifically to optimize this activity. Wind towers were aligned with interior galleries, garden paths, and elevated platforms to ensure that every seat was a good seat in the theater of breeze. And it wasn't just limited to private homes, palaces, administrative buildings, even entire city districts were planned with wind flow in mind. Some urban layouts were based on airflow maps, taking into account seasonal winds and topographical quirks. Cooling wasn't an afterthought, it was part of the design brief. You wander now into the Iwan, a vaulted space open on one side and facing the garden. This was where guests were received, where poetry was recited, where negotiations happened over pomegranates and sweet tea. The Iwan was always positioned to face the best wind direction, a performance space for politics, cooled by physics. Historians still discuss whether the proliferation of wind towers among the elite had more to do with functionality or status signaling. The likely answer? Both. It's one thing to survive the desert. It's another to look fabulous doing it. And when you're building a home that people will visit to beg favors or deliver tributes, a refreshing breeze goes a long way. Here's a fun side note. In some wealthy estates, multiple badgers were used not to cool different rooms, but the same room. 4 towers, each aligned to a cardinal direction, all feeding into a single central hall. The result? No matter which way the wind blew, someone was catching it. You can almost hear the engineer of the time saying, "Let's overachieve, shall we?" And the interior of these halls, oh, the detail. Mosaics that refract the afternoon light into shimmering colors. High ceilings designed not only to trap heat above but also to echo softly, carrying music and conversation like gentle wind chimes. Everything breathes. Everything sings. You pass a fountain fed by a subterranean channel, probably a qanat, of course, and realize it isn't just decorative. It's placed at the intake of one of the wind towers. As air passes across the moving water, it cools further before being pushed into the room beyond. The entire structure is a symphony, with wind as the composer and the architecture as its orchestra. Some scholars propose that these grand houses inspired innovations in other parts of the empire. Egyptian merchants brought back descriptions of wind towers. Indian architects studied them. As the empire expanded through trade and conquest, so too did the idea of mastering the breeze. But something else happened too. The technology evolved. In coastal regions, where humidity was a bigger problem than dry heat, towers were adjusted to dehumidify. In colder regions, they were modified to trap warm air during winter. The wind tower was not static. It adapted, much like the people who built it. And sometimes, innovation got whimsical. One estate was said to have a system of wind towers that triggered small wind chimes as the breeze passed through. Not loud, just a faint tinkling, like laughter whispered by architecture. Was it necessary? No. Was it wonderful? Absolutely. You lean against a carved pillar now, taking it all in, the symmetry, the softness of the air, the deliberate way everything seems to serve the experience of ease. It's not luxury in the modern sense. No gold faucets or velvet robes. It's luxury in the form of knowing how to be kind to your body, to your guests, and to the climate that surrounds you. And if you close your eyes for a moment, you might even hear what the wind tower says, something like, "Take your time, breathe easy, you've got all the air you need." The wind shifts slightly as you step back outside the grand estate, brushing past your shoulders like the hand of an old friend who's always been there. The sun is still blazing above, but you barely notice, after spending so much time inside structures that work with the heat instead of against it. Your body has adjusted. You're no longer bracing for the sun. You're flowing around it, just like the air itself. You walk along a narrow path now, lined with trees that lean inward like gossiping elders, their branches casting dappled light onto the path. You're headed toward another type of residence, more modest, perhaps, but equally fascinating, because not every wind tower was perched atop a palace. In fact, some of the most elegant uses of this technology were found in small homes, modest courtyards, and humble corners of the city. And yet, even here, there was no sloppiness, no good enough. The principles of cooling didn't belong only to the wealthy. They belonged to anyone who paid attention to the wind. You enter a family home now, much smaller than the noble estate, but welcoming in the way only a lived-in space can be. The bagger here is shorter, with just one shaft, positioned strategically to face the prevailing summer winds. Unlike the ornate multi-directional towers of the elite, this one does a single job and does it well. The living space is centered around a small courtyard. In one corner, there's a shallow basin, filled with water and a few floating flower petals. A child splashes her fingers in it, giggling as the breeze from the tower passes overhead. You smile. That's the trick, air over water. The same principle you saw in palaces. Adapted simply. A small fountain, a clay jug left to cool in the shade, a wet cloth hung across a doorway. Cooling, bit by bit. You sit on a woven mat placed exactly in the airflow's path. There's no guesswork here. Generations have learned where the air moves, where the floor stays coolest, where the afternoon light won't scorch the tiles. You realize that this isn't just a matter of architecture. It's a culture of awareness. Historians often point out that Persian domestic design evolved not only through innovation but through observation. People knew their homes like musicians know their instruments. They read shadows. They tracked seasonal winds. They understood when to open, when to close, when to pause. The house, in many ways, taught them how to live. You notice a small alcove in the wall, curved and shallow. A niche known as a taksha. It's not just decorative. In summer, it's used to store small objects, usually ones that benefit from the cooling airflow drifting through the room. A ceramic jar of rosewater. A cloth pouch of dried herbs. Even food. That's right, before refrigerators. Persians knew how to keep perishables fresh just by knowing where the air passed. And here's something oddly charming. Some families trained cats to sleep near these niches. Why? Because cats, with their uncanny sense of comfort, would always find the coolest spots in the house. Where the cat napped, that's where the air was best. Call it feline thermal mapping. Your host offers you a cup of kakshir, a cooling summer drink made from tiny reddish seeds soaked in water. It's slightly sweet, and somehow it tastes like the desert decided to be kind. As you sip, you notice a ceiling fan above you, not electric, not modern, just a broad, hand-woven piece suspended by a rope, moved gently by hand or sometimes by pulley. A slow, rhythmic sway that adds just a touch of breeze when the wind tower rests. You ask whether the badger still works. All these years later, your host smiles. Of course, she says, as long as the wind blows. That's all it takes. You step outside briefly, curious about the tower's base. It's connected, as expected, to a small ventilation shaft that feeds cool air into the central room. But here's the surprise. This home also has access to a narrow canal tunnel. Not for grandeur, just a trickle of water that passes beneath the property. The shaft is aligned with it, creating a temperature drop that turns the single shaft bagger into something far more effective than it seems. A fringe story your host shares. In older days, it was said that if you whispered a prayer into the wind tower at night, it would carry your wish to the stars. Romantic, sure, but it's easy to believe, standing here with the breeze curling softly around your ears. And still, there's more to notice. Every element of this home is curated for cooling. The whitewashed walls reflect light. The floors are made of packed earth mixed with straw, surprisingly cool underfoot. The furniture is low to the ground, allowing body heat to rise away. Even the layout of the rooms, narrow doorways, high ceilings, strategic shading, all play a role. Modern designers might call this passive cooling strategy. But here, it's just living. You watch as the family begins preparing for the evening. Curtains are drawn to preserve the indoor coolness. Water is sprinkled lightly across the courtyard tiles. A large, shallow pan of water is placed near the tower's vent. Tomorrow, it will help the breeze drop a degree or two. Every action is deliberate, small things, but when done consistently, they create comfort, stability, peace. And that's the lesson. It wasn't wealth that brought coolness. It was wisdom, patience, precision. As you stand to leave, the breeze picks up once more. You pause at the doorway, feeling it pass along your arms, up your spine, across your cheek. You close your eyes. Somewhere, above your head, the wind tower turns that motion into a gift. Invisible, simple, essential. And you realize that whether in palace or courtyard, whether rich or modest, the wind doesn't care. It only needs a little guidance, a path, a structure to pass through. And in return, it offers comfort, quietly, always. You leave the modest home with a bowed head and a deeper appreciation for the simplicity that surrounds you. The wind follows, always the wind. It slips down narrow alleyways, curls around corners, and rustles through dried trees with a whisper you've now come to recognize, not just as a sound, but a language, one spoken by a culture that learned to listen long before it learned to build. But as you walk farther, something changes. The wind towers become fewer. The buildings, while still traditional, are missing those familiar shafts rising into the sky. A few of the remaining baggers are crumbling, slanted at awkward angles, bricks missing like lost teeth. You've entered a part of the city where time has not been kind, or perhaps where time has simply moved on. You pause beneath one such tower. Its base is cracked. The vents at the top are partially blocked with debris. It hasn't worked in years. You glance around and see the signs. Air conditioning units bolted awkwardly to the side of adobe walls. Their grills buzzing. Extension cords snaking across rooftops like tangled veins. This is the modern age trying to override an ancient system. And it's not always graceful. You enter a building, newer construction. Flat concrete, small windows, a single fan wheezing into the room. It's warmer here, stagnant. You feel the difference immediately. The walls are thinner. The rooms are boxy. The wind has no invitation. It cannot enter. It cannot flow. It cannot do what it has always done. The irony is not lost on you. In pursuit of modernization, many homes were built without wind towers, without thick walls, without courtyards or water basins. They were faster, cheaper, better. But in this climate, better doesn't always mean smarter. Historians still debate why the bagger nearly disappeared. Was it colonial influence? The appeal of imported technology? Changing aesthetics? Likely all of the above. In the 20th century, new materials became available. Concrete, steel, glass. They offered new shapes, taller buildings, bigger cities. But they didn't offer better cooling, at least not passively. There's a fringe theory some urbanists share, that the decline of wind towers coincided with the rise of the individual over the communal. The bagger required cooperation, a shared courtyard, collective maintenance, a family rhythm attuned to nature. Air conditioning? Plug it in, shut the door, And forget the outside world. It's cooling for one, not cooling with many. You step back out into the street and glance upward again at that broken wind tower. A bird has made a nest inside. It's still shelter. In a way, still catching the wind, even if nobody inside feels it. And then, something beautiful happens. A child, maybe 9 or 10, points to the tower and asks her grandfather, "What's that?" The old man smiles and explains, not with resentment, but with pride. He describes how it worked, how it cooled their home when he was young, how they used to place jugs of rosewater beneath it on the hottest days. You keep walking, but the moment stays with you. Because what feels lost isn't necessarily forgotten. It's resting. You pass another house, this one half renovated. The badger is still intact. And to your surprise, someone has draped a piece of white cloth across the vent. You ask why. The woman sweeping the doorstep replies, "To catch the dust, so the air is clean." It's a small gesture, a single thread in a tapestry that could still be repaired. And here's where it gets interesting. Some architects today are paying attention again. Across Iran, and even beyond, in Egypt, India, the UAE, and parts of the US, a new wave of eco-conscious design is turning its gaze backward to look forward. Wind towers are making a quiet comeback, not as nostalgic novelties, but as active solutions to the world's growing heat and energy challenges. You pass a construction site where a modern home is being built, with a wind tower. It's made of steel and glass, sleek and minimal, but the principles are unchanged. It's positioned to face the summer winds. It channels air downward. It uses water at the base for evaporation. It's a 2.000-year-old technology dressed in 21st century skin. Your guide tells you about a school in Yazd that was recently redesigned to include badgers. The students no longer rely solely on fans or AC. The classrooms breathe again. The temperatures stay balanced. The children sit under the soft whisper of wind and learn math the same way their ancestors once learned poetry, in comfort. And yet, it's not a revolution. Not yet. Many wind towers still crumble. Many homes still chase the hum of compressors and coolants. But the seed is there. Planted. Remembered. You reach the edge of the city now. Where the desert opens again. The heat returns with intensity. But it doesn't feel quite so aggressive anymore. You know its tricks. You know its rhythms. And you know, now, that long before the hum of machines. People listened. People learned. People built. You turn back toward the skyline. One by one, you begin to notice the towers again. Some old, some new, some asleep, some still breathing. And you think, maybe this isn't a story of loss. Maybe it's a story of rest, of pause, of remembering. You stand on the edge of that city, half old, half new, and let the wind wrap around you one more time. It's familiar now, almost intimate, like you've made peace with it, learned its secrets, maybe even earned its trust. But what happens when modern engineers turn back? When today's cities, clogged with smog and metal and noise, realize that the answer might be buried under centuries of dust? You step into a small architecture studio tucked away behind a garden wall. Inside, the space is quiet, cool, minimalist, and right there, on the drafting tables and walls, are blueprints, many of them featuring wind towers. Tall, angular structures paired with solar panels. Others with living walls of plants and materials that breathe. But the principles? Still rooted in what you've seen over and over again. Movement, moisture, and mindfulness. Your guide introduces you to the architect. She's young, soft-spoken, and quick to smile when she hears you've just spent time walking through Yazd. "That's where I fell in love with air," she says. And just like that, you realize this isn't about nostalgia. This is about revival. She shows you a residential complex she designed, modern, sustainable, and 100% passive in its cooling. The roofs are flat, the materials are local, and every unit has its own variation of a wind tower, slightly adjusted to suit the climate. Instead of relying on artificial cooling, the system uses prevailing winds, thermal mass, shade, and even evaporative fountains. It costs less to build than a mechanical HVAC system, she adds casually, and it doesn't break when the power goes out. Historians still debate whether traditional systems can scale into the mega cities of today. And there's truth to the challenge. Wind towers don't work well in glass skyscrapers. They need shape. They need silence. They need cities willing to bend back toward nature rather than resist it. But some places are listening. You hear about a university in the Emirates testing updated badgers, taller, slimmer. Some even equipped with sensors that adjust vent direction automatically. Not to replace tradition, but to refine it. Marry ancient wisdom with modern tools. And a fringe detail that makes you smile. One design competition challenged architects to create a modern wind tower for Mars colonies. Why? Because even in space, cooling without power is a prized idea. Suddenly, that clay tower with wooden slats and a dome over a courtyard becomes futuristic. You walk out of the studio and into a neighborhood still under construction. The buildings rise slowly, some still skeletal. Some already coated in that sandy beige that softens under sun. And on more than one roof, you spot the towers again. Square, purposeful, elegant. These aren't copies of the past. They're echoes. And in that echo is something powerful. The idea that we don't always need to conquer nature. Sometimes, we can collaborate. You pause at a construction site where workers are installing a badger made of compressed earth blocks. Sustainable, breathable, locally sourced. One man wipes sweat from his brow and tells you it's for a school. The children will study under the wind, just like always. And you think about everything we've built over the last 100 years, glass towers that bake in the sun. Steel boxes chilled with humming machines. Windows that don't open. Efficiency measured in kilowatts. Comfort achieved through resistance. But then you look at a mud brick home with a basin of water in its courtyard. A simple shaft catching the afternoon breeze. And a shadow so deep it looks like silence. And you wonder, what if this is the future? You return to your room, your own modern space, with a view of rooftops and towers stretching into the horizon. You sit by the window, no longer rushing to shut out the sun, but watching it paint the city golden. The fan in the corner hums softly. But you barely notice it. Because now you can hear something else. The slow exhale of wind through slats. The quiet shift of air as it moves across a wall. Finds a corridor. Dips into a shaded room. And cools someone's skin. You've become fluent in the language of breeze. And suddenly, your world feels a little quieter. A little wiser. A little cooler. Not because technology advanced, but because someone remembered. You wake the next morning with a kind of stillness in your chest that doesn't come often, something earned. Maybe, or something inherited. The room is dimly lit. A single sliver of sunlight slides across the floor like a blade of gold. You stretch, slowly, and then you listen. The wind is still here. It moves through the tower above like breath through a flute, measured. Soft, consistent. You've grown so used to its presence that now it feels sacred. Like a hush in a library. Or the silence just before a bell rings. You don't want to move too quickly. You want to stay within this rhythm. You rise, barefoot, and step toward the open archway that leads out onto the small terrace. Above you, the badger catches the wind and bends it downward. Into this quiet chamber that has cradled you for hours. You feel it brush your face gently. Not cold, not strong, just right. You take a seat on a low stool. Your hands wrapped around a warm clay cup of tea, saffron infused. Faintly sweet, steam curling up toward the shaft of light that now spills across the courtyard wall. There's a fig tree nearby, its leaves gently fluttering, echoing the same patterns of air that have passed through this home for generations. It hits you then, in the most unassuming of moments. You've spent 2 hours, 2 entire hours, with nothing but air and time and clay and memory. No alarms, no news feeds, just a story told through stone and sky. You think about where you came from. The place where buildings seal themselves like coffins. Where air is pumped in at unnatural angles. Where the hum of machinery fills every silence. Where windows don't open and roofs are made not to walk on, but to be forgotten. Here, the roof is the destination. The breeze is not something you fight. It's something you welcome. And the house? The house remembers. It remembers how to breathe. It remembers how to cool your skin without a whisper of electricity. It remembers the rhythm of the sun and the lullaby of water. And it remembers, most of all, you, a body, a soul, a living being that needs not just shelter, but comfort. There's a strange humility in that, knowing that the answer was never complicated, just overlooked. That ancient hands, with no computer models, no mechanical sensors, no apps, had already solved the question we're still shouting at modern machines. How do we live with the heat? The answer: we don't fight it. We flow around it. We build for wind, not against it. We shape walls to soothe. We catch the sky and let it cool our dreams. You walk one last lap through the house, past the cool corners and quiet hallways, past the fountain in the courtyard and the jars placed carefully along the wall. The badger is still watching, still catching every breath of the world and sending it softly into your space. And you think, maybe, just maybe, this isn't the end of the story. Maybe it's the beginning. Maybe tonight, when the city falls asleep, and the machines go quiet, and the towers rise into the starlit sky, the wind will remember again. And we will, too. Now, as the last breeze settles and the light softens into the walls, let yourself drift. There's nothing left to explore tonight, only to rest. The clay beneath you has cooled. The shadows have lengthened, and the wind, your companion through this journey, has slowed to a gentle hush, like the breath of the house easing into sleep. The hum of the tower fades into the background of your thoughts, like a lullaby too familiar to need a melody. And the walls, thick and patient, hold onto the memory of coolness just a little longer, just enough to cradle your thoughts and keep the heat of the world outside where it belongs. Tonight, you're not a visitor. You belong here, among the ancient bricks and quiet domes, where stories float on the air and even silence has weight. Let your muscles soften. Let your eyes close. Let the calm enter you the same way the wind enters the house, with purpose, with grace, with no hurry. You are safe. You are cool. And the world, for now, is at peace. Sleep well beneath the ancient sky. And if you dream, may it be of soft wind through open towers and stars caught gently in clay basins. The breeze will be waiting. Good night.